Hello, and welcome to Health Talk, a show where we dive into common health challenges with local experts to bring you the information that you need to live your best, healthiest life. My name is Dr. Desmar Walks, family physician and local health authority for Austin Travis County. We think about community health and we often focus on medical care, exercise, or nutrition, but one of the most powerful factors affecting our well-being is how we handle harm and conflict in our communities. Traditional justice systems focus on punishment and create cycles of trauma that ripple through families and neighborhoods for generations. But there's another way forward. Restorative justice offers a different approach that focuses on healing rather than punishment, rebuilding rather than removing, and understanding rather than judgment. This approach isn't just about justice, it's about the health of our entire community. Our guests today are Kim and Sherwyn Patton, who lead the Life Anew Restorative Justice program. Since 2009, they've been working at the intersection of restorative justice and community health, helping both individuals and communities heal from harm while building stronger, healthier connections. In 2022, Life Anew partnered with local nonprofits and the Office of Violence Prevention at Austin Public Health to establish a community violence intervention and prevention program named ATX Peace. This joint venture has been impactful in reducing gun violence and retaliation within Travis County and surrounding areas. Additionally, it has had a profound impact on those who've been victims of gun violence. Today, we'll explore how restorative justice approaches can reduce trauma, strengthen community bonds, and create better health outcomes for everyone involved. We'll also discuss practical ways that healthcare providers and community members can support these healing-centered approaches. Welcome to our show, Kim and Sherwyn. I'm really happy to have you here tonight. First, I want to thank you for joining us today. And I always ask our guests, can you share with us how you got into this profession? What is your why?
I was kind of thrown into it because I really didn't want to do it. But when I got the job at the Travis County Jail as a counselor, I was just working with those coming in that had just been arrested in central booking, like, are you suicidal? Have you taken your meds? So, just asking the questions that we have to ask when they come in on the street. But then in 2004 and 2005, Sheriff Hamilton started this program called resolved to abolish violence everywhere, working with strictly men who had assault charges, any type of assault charges. And I'm like, how come no other counselors want to go? So that's really how I got started. And then once I started working with those men that were violent, and they taught me that I was violent, my guard started coming down, and I really got interested in, not really. But they said, yes, the way you come in, you look at us, and make these assumptions and judge us by, what we've done, the way we look, just your facial expressions. They called me out. And so if I hadn't really grounded myself and say, okay, and take a deep look at myself, I wouldn't be doing what I'm going to do. Because I wasn't trying to work with people. I was chasing money. It's all about that. And not about helping others change their lives, especially violence. But after that, my heart just, the layers of all the assumptions and the judgment and all that just started falling off of my heart, and I fell in love with it. 2009, March of 2009, of course, the program was working inside of the jail, and they ended the program. Even though they were not getting any money, I had volunteers coming in to help me facilitate circles, and the program ended, and then Life Anew was birthed. March 2009. Yeah, that's how I got into it.
So I guess it was around 2005 when Kim started doing the work inside of Travis County Jail, and so I was doing outreach for our church. And one of the things that I did was prison ministry, and I think, well, it may have been more around 2004 or something like that. Yeah, but at any rate, I was doing prison ministry, so I would go into the jails, and so actually, I would say that restorative justice found me rather than me finding it. And also restorative justice helped me to find my wife, because we got married in 2006, and so it was doing this work that we actually found that we had something in common, that we actually cared about people. And so in being inside of the jail supporting the RAID program at the time, we would be in these circles with men that were telling their stories. But what was interesting is that some of the volunteers were ladies as well. So it was men and women inside of those groups. And we were using a curriculum called Bridges to Life. And so we would listen to these stories and the stories of the men, but we also had these victim impact families where we would listen to the stories of people who have been impacted by the violence. And in listening to that, one of the things that stuck out to me is that there's really no difference between myself and the men that had committed these acts of violence. And also there was no difference between the people who have been harmed by the violent acts either. It's true, hurting people hurt people. And so one of the things that I became passionate about was running into people's pain. And being an outreach minister at the time, all of it had biblical reasons to it. And so I throw a little bit of that out there. Psalms 34:18 says that God is close to the brokenhearted and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. And so one of the things that I really believe is that when someone is going through pain and you're close to them and you're helping them to navigate through that as a peacemaker, then that's a representation of God's heart towards people. And he's close to that. And so that's the why we're close to people's pain and helping them to navigate through how to make things right when they cause harm, and also helping people to navigate through the healing process, because it is a process, and sometimes it's a process that never stops. We just get better, but the pain just it subsides, but sometimes that hurt is still always there. But we have to do that. We have to allow people to go through that in community, because we're better together than we are by ourselves. So that's the why.
I think you covered some of this, but there's so much more to talk about. How would you explain restorative justice to someone who's never heard about this concept before? I think we got a little taste of it with that.
Yeah. For me, I just would say it's just building relationships that truly matter and not trying to fix anyone, because like on the school campuses, when they hear restorative justice, or at our community first village where we work as well with the formerly homeless, when they hear the word justice, they think that they're in trouble. And so really we have to let them know that it's just relational building. I'm here to walk alongside of you, to just walk through life with you, because it's a lifestyle. It's not something that you just put on a hat. I'm gonna be restorative today over here, but then when I go home, pick out this hat, and I'm gonna be a wife or whatever. You're still a wife and a daughter, whomever. But the lifestyle is, I'm not gonna treat you the way that I would normally treat you, like ignore you or say things that I know that's gonna harm you. So really, it's just how do we live life together, even though we come from two different paths. But I want to get to know who you are, and you want to get to know who I am. So let's sit down and have a conversation, and we hear one another's stories. And then once you hear the stories, you're gonna realize we have so much in common. But you could also be used to restore a relationship that has been broken. So how do we repair this harm that has been broken? And so that's how I see it. It's just really just building these relationships that truly, truly matter if you want a true relationship.
I have I had a friend of mine he's no longer with us. His name is Eric Butler, and he just passed away a few months back. And when we were together some years back, he said something that always stuck with me. So when we're thinking about restorative justice, we always have to ask ourselves this question: what are we trying to restore? And so what we're really trying to restore is the justice of our imagination. And so what is it that we imagine? We imagine a world where when people do something wrong, they make it right. We imagine a world where we don't have this brokenness in relationships, so we have this connectedness that doesn't have to end because we're not intentionally harming each other. We imagine a world where there's peace that we don't have to work towards, that it just exists. And so it's really about restoring the justice of our imagination. And so if we were in a perfect world, then we would have a world where we wouldn't have to worry about harm because we wouldn't intentionally do harm to each other. But because that does exist, then what we have to do is strive towards what we imagine to have. And we have to always keep this word, this little short word called hope in humanity, that if we can just imagine ourselves being restored to one another and repairing these harms in relationships and being able to have meaningful, transformative relationships with one another where we can use our relationships to help other people, then we can actually get to the point that we're striving for, but we just cannot stop imagining people being made right with each other. And so when I think about restorative justice, it's about us daring to hope. I think it was Obama actually quoted Jeremiah Wright when he talked about the audacity of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're thinking about this restorative, we're talking about having the audacity to hope that we can get the relationships that we always imagine have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think about.
I love that. I was talking to someone this morning about things, and he said the system isn't the problem, it's the transactions that occur that get us off kilter. And so when you're going through the court system, it can be hard for everybody involved, the perpetrator and the victim, and that can result in significant trauma to both parties, right?
Sure.
So can you talk about how that plays out in the work that you do?
Okay. So I'm gonna hold somebody else and then I go into the questions. So Dr. Fania Davis says it like this, and she's a restorative practitioner that started RJOY, Restorative Justice for Open, and she said, we have a system that harms people that harm people to prove that harming people is wrong. And so when we go into the justice system, then we already know when we go in with this restorative mindset that is countercultural.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people, even those who have been harmed, there's something about us that we want to see people held accountable, right? But we want to know that they're held accountable. And accountability does not mean over punishing somebody. It means a change in that behavior. It means that we don't want to see that person harm somebody again. Now, for the person who has been harmed, what they have to determine within themselves is that they're going to become somebody who is now now safe. Somebody who no longer wants to violate other people. So when we talk about restorative, it gives people that opportunity to become what they want to be. And so we do this inside of the jail setting. The thing that I love to see is the becoming of a person, because a person can become something totally different than what they were when they entered into the situation. And then they become what we call advocates. And what we mean by advocacy is they can help other people to not be violent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a system now that's learning that the best way to make sure that our society is safe is to help people to become restorative. We have to repurpose pain. And so most of the time when people commit egregious acts, it's because they've been hurt by somebody before and nobody did anything about it. Just think about it. Just even think about, I don't want to get too far out, but if you think about some of the acts that's happened with, I hate to bring this one up, but there were things missed with the young man at Robb Elementary School. People knew that this young man had some mental health challenges, and yet there were things that were not done in order to support him not being harmful to himself and other people. The signs were there. And so what we have going on now is that people are starting to understand that if we don't start entering into people's pain and help them to be restored and do it in a way that's compassionate, that we're going to eventually see somebody act out in a way that's going to not harm just themselves, but other people.
So you're talking about addressing a problem upstream, recognizing those signs, taking that pain, healing it, and repurposing the energy and restoring the person.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. Whenever you
Taking your pain and turning it into a purpose. Because when I worked in the jail with the guy named Thomas Cervantes, who was Mexican Mafia, I would have never sat down to listen to him. But he is the one that helped me to learn how to listen to his pain. So that's all he talked about is, his pain of how he got where he was. He was in a little box with no human contact. So I had to see him every day. And so the stories he would tell me of how he got to where he is in this game started when he was in third grade. And so he's just wanted to learn how to be, he would say, normal, because he lived a life of just always harming people. Mm-hmm. And then once he was released, in the world, he really didn't know how to not harm. But right before he passed in 2020, he saw Sherwyn at HEB. And he said, I'm finally getting it together. Mm-hmm. I'm getting ready to move to my tiny home. But he was, 40, almost 50 years old, and still hadn't really learned how to do life. But he was getting ready to use all that, repurpose himself, to help others to not go down the lane that he had gone through. But he didn't get the opportunity to do that. He passed before that. But yeah, repurposing all that pain is what.
So when you talk about healing, are you also incorporating mental health services into that as well?
So we learned this along the way, because we used to think that you can just circle your way out of anything, and we learned that we needed to have people who understood trauma informed, people who were therapists that understood restorative practices, and so now we have those individuals on our team, and it's needed because sometimes there are situations where people need to have that one-on-one connection with someone that understands mental health. Mm-hmm. And what the circle does is that it will help to identify that. And so, I say that circles are a good assessment tool also, because as you listen to somebody's story, like I give you an example of that. Just here recently, it was a traumatic situation that we knew that we were going into. So we had therapists that were there and that were present, and they were in those circles. And so as a part of our community, they were able to identify, what was needed. Mm-hmm. And so why is that important? Well, when you think about restorative, it really is about an ecosystem or a village that's coming together. And so in a village, you need to have different people that play different roles. So it makes sense to have people that have different expertise in the circle to be able to help the community. And so mental health is definitely very important. And the circles in themselves, we believe, supports mental health, because it's allowing people to process pain. Mm-hmm. But without having the right people in those circles, sometimes it can do some harm too. And so that's the reason why you have to have those two.
So how do restorative practices help rebuild social connections that are really essential for a community's health? And talk a little bit about the circle.
Okay. So
okay. That's true.
I tell you all are married.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So can you restate the question, Paul?
So, how do restorative practices help rebuild social connections that are really essential for a community's health?
So in the circle, I think that one of the things that is that happens is that we get a chance to practice listening. And in our society, we've learned how to wait our turn to talk, but listening has nothing to do with that. But we get a chance to listen without interruption in service. And in terms of building social connections, just think about it, how validating it is, and affirming that it is when someone is actually seeing you and listening to you. And so in terms of building social connections, I think that it allows us to establish enough boundaries for us to be able to be heard. And I think that that's something that everyone needs. The other piece of that that I believe that is essential in terms of our community health, it allows us to also do what we call consensus decision making. The best innovative ideas come from people who are able to share with one another, and the circles allows that. And we don't really know what a person has to offer until we've taken time to listen to them. And that's what I learned actually from being inside of the jail listening. I was like, man, every man in here and every lady that's in here has so many gifts and talents that we don't even know about, and it's hidden because nobody is listening to them. And so I think that in terms of these social connections where we're able to affirm people and value people, and celebrate people's strengths, and also be able to celebrate one another's weaknesses. Because if I'm weak in a certain area, then that means I'm really dependent upon your strength. That helps us to see our need for one another, and that helps our connectedness.
What positive changes have you seen in communities where restorative justice is allowed to take place?
Repeat that again?
What positive changes have you seen in communities where restorative justice is allowed to take place?
Yes, I guess you want me to talk about trust and messenger? So we have trust and messenger. Well, I'll let you talk about that. I'm going to talk about what I know. What I know best in the community. And so I work with a lot of young women, young girls that are in schools and that are dealing with a whole lot of trauma that they keep in. I was at the service this weekend with a 16-year-old young lady who was shot at the playground. And when I was at the services on Saturday, a lot of the teenage girls didn't want to stay inside the church because they said they just didn't take seeing her in capacity. So they were standing outside of the church. And so I just, of course, I went over there and said, hey, what school do y'all go to? And how y'all doing today? You doing all right? And they were like, not really, but I can't go inside. And I said, so how do you take care of yourself when you're going through a situation like this? Who do you talk to? Where are you? Do you talk to your mom? And I said, no. Do you talk to your dad? No. I said, well, how do you take care of your mental health and make sure that you don't go get into depression or sad or want to harm yourself? And they said, well, I can either call her sometimes or, I just cry myself to sleep. And so I see my connection is that I need to really build this community for these young ladies to have a space where they can just share. So I said, well, what if we would just do like a Zoom and we just come together and you may not want to say anything, but you have this space to talk about how you truly feel it, because y'all are taking on a lot on these campuses with a lot of your friends that are being killed by gun violence. And so that right there is just, it made them like say, yeah, they would say, well, what's your number? Call me yet, but they have it. I said, even though you may not want to start right now, I told them, but you got my information. Please talk to somebody because this is heavy. And you're only 13, 14, 15 years old. And so that's how I build that. I'm using that sort of to build those connections, to allow them to see that, hey, we all are hurt. But if we keep it on the inside, we're really going to harm ourselves even more. So just letting it out, no matter what it is.
So, wow. When someone goes to prison, the whole family's affected. How does restorative justice help keep families together?
So I think that the word empathy is really important, right? And the reason why I say that is that oftentimes when a person in prison is doing time, they're not doing time by themselves, and so they have other people who are there with them. And so I'm gonna share a piece of what Kim is actually better at than I am. So in terms of keeping connection between families, she has a person that she has taken on the role of seeing inside of one of the prisons. The person is doing a lot of time, hopefully coming up for parole soon. But she's also connected to the family, Kim is. And so she spends a lot of time having conversations with the family to help them to understand the experience of the person who's inside. And so it's really interesting. I've been watching this because I believe that she needs to write about it because it's a circle keeper of sorts where you're getting an opportunity to stand in the gap and really communicate with two parties that may not be communicating with one another. So some would call it mediation. She's circle keeping because she's keeping them connected to one another. So I see restorative in that way. A circle is not always us sitting in a circle. A circle is any time that you hold space for people to be able to connect with one another, and so that and uphold values that help them to be better in their relationships. And so that's what Kim does well. Now, in terms of how we see this in with groups of folks, we get the opportunity to go into one of the units here in Texas, and in doing so, we get an opportunity to converse with men. This is our all men's unit, and it's a max unit, and use restorative methods, and then have restorative conversations over the radio station that they have inside that goes to all of the prisons in Texas and also 12 other states.
Wow.
And have restorative conversations, restorative dialogue. And I think in doing so, then it really is creating a language that people can speak. And that's another thing that restorative does. And so it helps to give us a language to be able to communicate with others. That helps us connect. So how does that help when I get reintroduced to my family? Now I have a language that I can use with them that is more compassionate, and vice versa. And so I think that in terms of how we help people that are in prison, even if they're not able to have their families there in that circle, right? They have surrogate family members, us, that are out in the community that carry other people in with us to have these intentional conversations. We were just there. That was last month. It was about 5 or 6 of us that went in, and we not only were in the general population, but they allowed us to go to death row. And I'm not going to use any names here, but
The guys in
they
there
named it
to Life Row.
They named it to Life Row.
It's still alive.
And so while we were on Life Row, there's a family that we know that has someone that's on Life Row. And so here we are with in our restorative mindset, and we tell the guards, hey, we want to go and we want to talk to that person because we need to talk to them as a representation of their family. And so when we spoke to that person on Life Row, not only was he happy to hear, but also happy to hear that this was somebody connected to his family that he recognized. And then we were able to go back and carry the messaging back to his loved one of the love and how he felt about it. And so when we think about that and bringing empathy into the equation, no matter what decisions people have made, you still want them to have an intimate connection and have a chance for redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And restorative offers that, even when we've committed the most egregious acts, or accused of the most egregious acts, let's say that, accused of the most egregious acts, when we use restorative, it doesn't discriminate between the person who is free or the person who's in prison. It just sees the humanity in everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so that allows us to connect people to their families as well.
That's a huge circle that you talk about, right? When you talk about using a radio station to expand the reach. And I want to go back to what you spoke of, Kim, about the girls whose friend was killed, and then circle back to what you're talking about, what you're doing inside the units. And then just talk about all of that pain and realize that addiction is pain, right? So crime and addiction go hand in hand oftentimes. And do you use restorative justice approach that differently, or is it the same sort of thing where you're identifying the pain and healing pain?
Me, when I just identify the pain, they let them identify the pain and why they use the drug to subside that pain. That's what a lot of the students talk about, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm using this because I don't want to think about this when I go home or what's happening at home. And so where I just create a space to where this is your space.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Or not, you know, but you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Even in your silence,
Mm-hmm.
I see the pain. I see
Mm-hmm.
that you're dealing with.
So what are some examples of how restorative practices have helped communities develop healthier conflict resolution skills? And I wanted to bring up that they must be teaching it in kindergarten, because my 2-year-old granddaughter caught me trying to ignore my daughter when she was trying to tell me something. And she turned around and looked at me and said, "Mommy's trying to say something." And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am," because I realized I was trying to ignore my daughter. And she picked up on it. So how do we teach that so that we are all being mindful of others around us and making those healthy connections?
We have to just be intentional about, okay, this is what we're going to focus on. This is the piece that we want to work on. How do we communicate in love and not harm somebody, but speaking the truth in love, even though it may hurt, because we don't want to hear it. But how do we do this? How do I pass it on? Because like I call it discipleship with the work that we do and the people that we have that's on the team. So I'm really modeling what it looks like to go into the schools and how to have conversations with people who are difficult and people who may not want to change. You don't force them, and you don't get mad because they don't want to change. So if you have someone in training that's with you and you're trying to teach them how to be kind and patient and all these other kind things that is part of being restorative, then you just model it. Because they're watching. Because your granddaughter was watching.
She sure was.
So you have to model it. It's not something you're going to train. I mean, you can do some training on how to, the language that we use and stuff, but really I feel is how do I act? What am I showing people?
Before we wrap up today, I heard listening as being a big part of this, right? Is there anything else that you want our listeners to know?
You know, I want to let the listeners know we have some amazing restorative coordinators that are who have given their life as messengers to be in schools. So you talked about elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
There are elementary schools that they're in, and we are learning that as young as pre-K, they understand. They might not use the terminology values, but they understand what values are. There are standards, I'm gonna say, that are established in households, and once we help people to establish healthy standards, and allow them to understand in their own language how to communicate that, then we see the change happening. So when you ask about how do we see this impacting communities, we are seeing a lot of times when we talk about the hopelessness that we see, I see a lot of hope in this future generation, because they have a window into other people's experiences that we don't have. And we demonize the fact that they have all this access. But if we had it, we would use it too. And so what it is that we have to, what we're learning is that we have to understand and allow them to teach us how to use the tools that they have to connect. Because there's nothing wrong with what the tool, it's just the way the tool is used. So I would say this, understanding is important, and not allowing our age and the time that we grew up in to keep us stuck in believing that this is some kind of way wrong because they approach it differently. No, they just have better tools. And so we have to see that as an opportunity. So listening is important. Understanding is important. Affirming others is important. And then also validating the fact that we hear others. So when somebody says something to me, that I should be able to restate what they say. Validate
the kernel of truth. So are we listening? So did I hear that kernel of truth? Because I'm listening with my heart and not with my head, and that's saying, this is what you need to do. I had to learn that. So listening from the heart and not of where I'm going to help you fix what you're saying. Just when they're ready for me to validate that I'm able to validate because I was truly listening.
Last thing I say is we have to magnify the voices of the future generation, the ones that are going to be leading after us. They're already leading now. Every major movement that you've seen that sticks, like for instance, if I came out with a dance right now, nobody's going to be doing that dance. But nobody. No. But you let a young person come out with the dance, and all of a sudden it becomes a thing. And so they're leading us, and we have to celebrate that. And so I think that understanding that is important, and using restorative as a means of making sure that their voices get heard is important. And the last thing that I'll say, as far as the second to the last thing I'm gonna say, is one of the things that we celebrate in the community is that we have what we call ambassadors. So they're young people on purpose, and they're living out what they're talking about. They're going into hard conversations, and they're willing to have it. And we just were at a high school just the other day, and they got up and they led their whole 9th and 10th grade student body through having these conversations, and willing to stand up and say, be restorative. Let's find a way to make the wrongs right. And so we have to celebrate those things instead of talking about our generation that we have. And so I refuse to say that they're wrong. I think that we're wrong in our approach towards them.
Kim?
Ben, you said it all.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. No. Thank you, Kim and Sherwyn Patton. Oh my gosh, what a great conversation. That's all the time we have for today's episode of Health Talk. Thank you to KAZI 88.7 and to St. David's Foundation for their support of this program. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. This is Dr. Desmore Walks signing off. Be well.
is because sometimes people may not come to the agreement that we can resolve our issues, but we can come to the agreement of how we're going to be,
Cordial.
yeah, or how we redefine the relationship. And sometimes that's okay because the relationship needs to be redefined. And
So we can talk about that.
practice in our schools. We do it all the time, and that's and what I'm talking about is when we isolate kids and tell them to just they have reflection time and in school suspensions, and you have the same group of kids that end up going back, and we know this from being on campus. It's the same group of kids that can continue to be isolated. But in restorative, we don't encourage that. We do encourage that there's always going to be consequences in life, but we have to consider the question whether or not this is going to help a person to grow. So usually if all I have is negative thoughts, negative thought patterns, and I'm accustomed to acting out on those, and you tell me to sit in a corner and self-reflect, all I'm thinking about
It's the same negative.
What am I going to do to get back
Yeah.
now? I got to do another strategy. I'm going to get you back. But so now I'm by myself, I have time to sit and think. But when I see that person again, this is what I'm going to do. Instead of having them, talk through it,
That's right.
You have to prep them first before you bring the two together, but you talk them through like, okay, so what happened? How can we help you work through this situation,
And sometimes what we've seen, I know we just talking them, but sometimes what we've seen, even if they're not ready to talk,
We don't
them,
force.
not forcing them, but they have the option to talk. But when you put them in an environment where you have no option to talk, and you have kids that really need to say something to get something out, and you cause them to suppress that, and they've already been in abusive situations, we don't know what the root cause is yet, but we've told them that we want you to self-reflect, and that's one of the first things that we address as a means of implementing restorative practices is how are we isolating kids, and are we working with them in order for them to have someone that they trust an adult that they can talk to versus putting them in a corner or putting them in a room and thinking that they're going to be okay. They're not okay. That's the reason why they're acting out, because they're not okay.
Right. And isolation is not connection.
It's not
And
connection.
the Surgeon General just came out with well, actually it was last year, talking about isolation being a public health crisis and the impact that that's having on overall mental health. And then if you look at one of his recent public health advisories, he was looking at parents and caregivers and how they're isolating themselves and also feeling stress because they've got all of these boxes they're checking, as they're trying to make put their kids in after-school programs and make sure that they're the best at all the things and that they're going to be in STEM and da-da-da-da-da, and how they've become isolated because they're spending so much time doing that and not doing anything for self-care and not connecting. And so connection is really important on so many levels. I don't think we can get to that today, but I don't know. There's a lot to unpack. You ready? Will you guys